Despite the perpetual and aggressive efforts to prove otherwise, voter fraud is a straw man propped up by Republicans every election cycle. And this year they are joined in many instances by the Tea Party. But all you really need to know about so-called anti-voter fraud efforts is that they are anti-voter. And the term voter integrity might as well be code for voter intimidation. At least Arizona has once again shown the country how not to do it. Now that a three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has struck down one of Arizona's laws, this one required people to provide proof of American citizenship to register to vote. The court said that the law conflicted with the National Voter Registration Act. Since the offending Arizona law was passed in 2004, few illegal immigrants tried to register to vote, according to the Mexican-American Legal Defense Fund. But 30,000 actual citizens have been rejected to vote under the law. And there you have the template. It's all about intimidation of legitimate voters and the suppression of votes, except that most anti-voter fraud efforts are even more overtly partisan. In St. Paul, Minnesota, Tea Party organizers and related groups announced what they were offering a $500 reward for anyone who turned in a person eventually prosecuted for voter fraud. This is according to the New York Times. Organizers also announced surveillance squads to videotape so-called irregularities. In Milwaukee, there have been protests over this billboard: "We voted illegally," with images of people behind bars. The Republican Party of Wisconsin says it has no idea who put that up. In West Virginia, Republicans, though, have launched a large-scale anti-voter fraud program. "This is strictly our effort," said Robert Cornelius of the West Virginia GOP. "And we have what we have termed our ballot security teams. We're going to be out in these counties and have been out already." In North Carolina, 24 complaints already about intimidation by so-called poll watchers who have reportedly been standing behind registration tables, which is illegal, and who have been taking pictures of the license plates of curbside voters, which is also illegal. In Illinois, Republican senatorial candidate Mark Kirk has been criticized for declaring his intent to send voter integrity squads to African-American neighborhoods in Chicago. That according to the Washington Post. The Republican National Lawyers Association has been training lawyers for Illinois as well as for other states like Nevada. According to its chairman, David Norcross, Mr. Norcross has called voter fraud, quote, an epidemic. The reality is quite different. During the presidency of George W. Bush, whose Justice Department aggressively pursued so-called voter fraud, only 95 people were ever charged, only 55 convicted. Of those 55, fewer than 20 were convicted of casting fraudulent ballots, again, according to the New York Times. Only 5 were convicted of registration fraud. But the imagery of veritable armies of ghost voters continues to escalate from the right, with Dick Armey, one of the founding astroturfers of the Tea Party, actually suggesting Democrats are establishing an edge in early voting due to voter fraud.
Well, no, I'm not surprised. This is an aberration that's born out of the fact that in early voting there's less ballot security. The Democrats are always much more active in the areas where the ballot security is reduced. And if you start focusing on this, it is pinpointed to the major urban areas, the inner city, those areas.
What we've shown here are illustrative examples, far from an exhaustive list of all these reckless charges and intimidating practices, and many outside Republican groups are devising voter integrity efforts, according to the Washington Post, because they come under less legal scrutiny than the actual party, the Republican National Committee. Sound familiar at all?